excited, I hope, this morning. Look, welcome again. I know Penrose is welcome. Please give a quick round of applause for the folks at Penrose putting this all together. Premier, I'll jump right into it. We're at the 5th annual Tech Summit here. In 2017, one of your larger platform pledges in the election was to advance a digital asset sector and regime in Bermuda. 5 years later, 6 years later, where are we?
Thank you, Jeff. So I'll put it this way. I think that the journey has been an interesting one, to say the least. We started from the perspective of not really knowing and understanding this particular thing. And, when we first got started, I've told the story that didn't really know much about this. It was something that was more of a, how would I say, something that was included in our replies to the budget, but that was more of the impetus of the former leader of the Progressive Labor Party, an area that he had interest in, so we carried it on. But it was not something that I had intimate knowledge of. And it wasn't until I came into office and persons were speaking about that the fact that there is regulatory clarity that might be needed for this particular industry that we started delving into it. So we got started in 2017 in earnest, set up a task force, and by 2018, we had tabled rules and regulations around there. I mean, I think our approach has changed. I have no regrets in the main around what we did. It was important that Bermuda established itself and got its name out. I mean, today's headline certainly is a picture of me and one of the richest people in the world, the former CEO of Binance, and the thing in the cabinet office. But I think that it's important to note that what we were focused on doing was making sure that we put Bermuda on the map. It's an important distinction to note, however, that what we've set up in Bermuda worked. Because whether it was that company or other companies, they were not able to pass the regulatory muster that was required for them to operate from Bermuda. Of course, what we did in 2019, we changed our approach. And our approach was that we would not be doing these type of things without companies until they got regulated, until they passed the regulatory muster of the BMA. And we focused our approach on trying to be all things to all people, and then focusing on the highly capitalized companies that were in this sector that were focused on compliance. Because the one thing that we must do is jealously guard our international reputation. And I think that has borne fruit of that approach. Now we're up to about 30 DABA companies, the company of which you certainly work for. Coinbase is one of the most recognizable names in this sector and continuing to do work. And so I think that the journey, though it has been bumpy, I think that people cannot question the results of this journey, because this journey has seen us establish a sector here, make sure that we're providing opportunities for Bermudian employment, and leading the space of innovation of the convergence of digital assets and other areas of financial services, which is key and is a place where Bermuda has always wanted to position itself and where I think we can be successful.
Yeah, there's rumors abound that Bermuda's pretty good at managing risk. So, we sit here, and again, and you talked about, companies that are focused on being compliant, fully compliant. I think that there's this idea that, heavy regulation or regulation period would stifle innovation. And I've always argued that that's quite the opposite. When you have a very clear set of guidelines, be them stringent or not, when you have a very clear set of regulations, you're able to set up guardrails within your company and then, innovate and move as fast as you possibly can in a safe and a compliant manner. I mean, you've been around the world inspiring businesses to come in here. Many of the businesses who are here today already licensed because of conversations that they've had with you overseas. You talk a lot about the ecosystem. Let's unpack that a bit, because for folks that don't truly understand the breadth of what that ecosystem looks like, we oftentimes, it's an echo chamber of just digital asset companies. The ecosystem in Bermuda, what is that? Let's unpack that a bit.
Well, I think that what we're seeing with the ecosystem of Bermuda are companies that understand that what Bermuda offers we say this word regulatory clarity, but what it really means is there is a new asset class that is emerging in digital assets. And the question is, how can digital assets be used to bring not only efficiency to the way that markets operate, but also to provide better services for the people of the world? And if we look at it from the perspective of just take Bermuda and insurance, you know, the space of which we hold in insurance is world leading. But there is a convergence when it comes to insurance, when it comes to digital assets, when it comes to traditional funds, when it comes to banking, and all of that innovation which is required to take place. And so when I travel around the world, what people happen is that they are stunned. First of all, they say, you all don't market yourselves well enough, which of course would be quite funny to many of the persons who used to vote for me, but now, who used to vote for you, but now, vote here. I think it is the fact is that they say that we aren't tooting our horn enough about what it is that we offer. So whether it's the meetings with a Coinbase, whether it's meetings with other leading companies in the world, they're like, we did not realize the types of things of which you can do in Bermuda. And the fact of which we've seen our digital asset insurance sector grow, the fact that we've seen our digital asset industry grow, now we want to make sure that we can finalize the matters related to banking, but we know we have the accounting firms that are involved, we know we have the law firms that are involved. The ecosystem is here, and our track record of innovation when it comes to insurance, our track record of innovation is now going to transfer into the digital asset realm. And the things of which we are seeing that are now being pioneered here in Bermuda only mean that this is being known as a place for innovation. And for people who are wondering what you can do in the Bermuda ecosystem, I would just say, bring your ideas, your thoughts to the government. Bring your ideas and thoughts to the Bermuda Business Development Agency. Bring your ideas and thoughts to Bermuda Monetary Authority. There's one of two things that will happen. We'll say, no, that's not for us, or we'll say, that's an interesting problem that we have not thought about it. Let's look into see if we can address it in a way that manages risks, but that allows you to deliver innovation and provide innovative solutions to investors and capital markets around the world. And we are succeeding in doing that.
You've clearly set the table for success, and it's a large table to have that in that ecosystem. I got to ask you, though, who's missing from that table? Who should be around that table that's not today?
Well, I would say who's missing around the table. It is the broader, I would say what's missing from our ecosystems particularly is that Bermuda has always been challenged because we are a highly regulated international financial services center, which unfortunately suffers from what I speak when I'm in the United States of what we call international geographic redlining. Whether or not we have the highest compliance ratings in the world, whether or not our BMA is recognized, we are always lumped in a group of countries that do not have strong financial controls.
I blame the Beach Boys, that Kokomo song.
That's it.
Right?
That might be it. But the fact is, we've had difficulty advancing matters related to banking, and banking is the key point that is going to continue to unlock. The government will continue to work on those particular issues. The government knows that we have to make sure, and with the Bermuda Monetary Authority alongside, we are making progress, but that's it. But I also would recognize that part of the ecosystem as well, I know there's persons who are visiting here talking about, the accounting firms, making sure to provide the assurance services which are necessary for BMA compliance on those particular levels. And so from that aspect, the final thing which is missing is adoption, which is adoption locally. Now that is part of the banking problem because, it's a little bit more difficult here, even if, I'm signing up with accounts for Coinbase or still having to deal with, wiring money overseas because the local banking rails aren't here. But that progress is happening. It's slow. But if you just go ahead and take a look at where we were in 2018, where no one wanted to even touch this industry and was saying the government should not be going down this direction, to look at where we are now, where we do have local banks that are trying their best to be a part of this solution, to do their best to try and participate in what it is that we're doing. It is going to take a matter of time. But the thing is, it's important to note, and I think everyone knows, some of the largest financial services companies in the world have digital asset strategies. They're leading in heavy to digital assets because they recognize that digital assets is the future of finance. And so for us, our digital finance mandate is continuing to push and continuing to make sure that everyone knows that they have a role to play, and to invite the innovators who want to do things in a well-regulated environment that they may not be able to do in the United States or other jurisdictions, to do it here in Bermuda to serve a global client base.
Yeah, that really hits home, I think, and for many people here. It's probably, I would guess, 50, 60% of folks here who are living in Bermuda and working in Bermuda, and maybe even part of that ecosystem. I think it's gone from a concept from 5-6 years ago when we were talking about this to actual use case and things that are actually going on. I read this week that some of our partners here today, Names, it leverages now Mountain Protocols, USDM, which is the first permissionless yield-bearing stablecoin, as a collateral for insurance policies. And they're doing that to improve the returns for investors. They've done that again with another company here, Prospero, which is not a digital asset company. So things are happening now that was exciting to read. I mean, there's actually things happening now in not in abstract ways, in real ways. And then there are people in this room, but also Bermudians working at these companies who are part of that ecosystem that are actually making actual transactions in the financial sector and beyond that. So I think that's an exciting point. What are your reactions to sort of hearing it going from that concept to hearing use case and seeing that on the ground?
So I would say that personally, I think it's gratifying. One of the things you know from your time in politics and serving as a minister of the government is that oftentimes you have to be focused on the agenda and kind of block out the noise. You have to have confidence that what you are trying to make sure that you build and the legacy of which you're trying to leave over the long term may not fully manifest while you're around, but the fact is that over time it will bring benefits to the citizens of whom you love. And I think from this perspective, that is what we're seeing. When you're talking about that matter between Names, between Coinbase, between Prospero Re and others, what you are seeing is that our traditional insurance sector is also learning how to utilize what we've built for the digital asset platforms in Bermuda to bring more capital, to provide better return for investors, and to provide better services for those persons for the risks of whom they're insuring. And I think that is just the tip of the iceberg, because as more persons learn, understand, see these things, understand how you can use digital assets to do things more efficiently and better, we're going to see continued growth and innovation. And that's what we wanted to see. When you look at the Financial Policy Council, who oversees, and advises the Minister of Finance on matters related to the economy, digital finance is important. It is happening in the world. We have London, who is trying to implement things, to try and copy of what we've done. We know whatever the US is doing. We know we see competition from Asia. We know that the UAE. We were the pioneers and leaders, and we are the ones who are being looked at around what are regulations and how these things are. And I think that it is clearly not understood because our local media has their own slant. Our local media will find any way, shape, or form to try to make the government look bad. But one of the things they do not highlight, in my view, are the successes of which are taking place. The Bermudians that are working in this industry, yes, there are going to be failures. There were failures in insurance. Some of the companies that were around the 80s aren't here now. But you're not going to be able to innovate unless you do have those times when there are failures, where these ideas may not work. But if 10% of the ideas don't work and 90% do, that is something that the country should be proud of and want to press ahead with.
I know you and I are coming up on time, and we have a really good morning and afternoon sessions where we're going to hear from the industry and some of their recent successes and actual case studies. But I want to ask you to indulge me for a bit. Let's indulge. It's 5 years from now. We're at the 10th annual Tech Summit. Karim still looks young. Sean still looks young. These guys. But it's the 10th annual Tech Summit. what's gone on in the last 5 years? What would we talk about here to sort of look back on the 10 years? This 5-year gap, like where do you think it's going to go? Like what would we talk about in 5 years?
Well, when you talk about the future, hopefully they invite me back post-premiership so I can sit here and talk. I can assure that, my pictures won't look that pretty. I'm quite certain that the hair would be gone.
I'm here to tell you there is life after politics.
Oh, I understand very clearly, Jeff. I would say that that time will come, and I'm looking certainly forward to it. But what we discuss around, what will be here in 5 years, I hope the discussions are around the everyday use of digital assets for Bermudian citizens, number one. We recognize that digital assets and the power which it has the ability to vastly reduce, some banks might be upset, I hope there's no banks here, but the amount of money that are paid to banks in fees and other things because these transactions are far more efficient and are able to be settled in real time. So that's number one. I want to see mass adoption. But number two, what I actually believe that we will see with companies like Coinbase leading the way and other major players internationally setting up operations to do their international digital asset operations out of Bermuda. That's where we were. I mean, if you look back now, insurance in Bermuda is about 35 years old in the main, the insurance industry that we have now. We are just at the start of the digital asset industry. And so if you take it that the starting was in 2018 with the passage of DABA, we're about 6 years after that. If you look into the future, that's what it is. And I want persons to think, recognize, understand that this is just the beginning. But if we are here on the ground floor, it's important. The other thing that I want to see is that unlike the insurance industry, which was largely led by external capital, I want to ensure that the Bermudians that are here in the audience, the Bermudians that are in our new signature schools, that are learning tech, that are being mentored by persons inside of these companies are actually able to innovate and to start their own businesses themselves. I think that is the key because digital assets allows the opportunity for persons under a regulated environment to get investment, to put forward ideas to make sure. And I hope that the community of digital asset persons are also leaning in heavily to support Bermudian innovators. Yes, they may innovate something for this very small market, but what we want to make sure to do is that those things can then be scaled up to the rest of the world. That's the positioning that Bermuda takes. We take the position that we're the ideal place for persons to innovate in digital assets, to go ahead and come up with products and services, test them in our local markets, let persons in Bermuda, instead of saying, oh, I wish I had what they had over there in the United States or other places here, I want it to be the other way around, to say, look at what they're able to do in Bermuda. They're innovating there, and the companies that are testing here are then exporting those services and those products to the rest of the world. So I think the future is bright, and in 5 years, I sincerely hope that I'll be invited back to the International Tech Summit, so I might be able to sit down with a slightly older Jeff Barron, as two retired politicians at that time, and to talk about what we were a part of building. Because we joke, in Parliament, whenever when the One Bermuda Alliance will, attack us for digital assets, I said, well, it can't be that bad. One of your former ministers is working in it. And so from that aspect, we'll be able to talk about it in a different aspect. But it's good that most of the political spectrum has come on board. I think that's important for international credibility. It is important that, that the BMA has always been on board, that persons in industry are on board, recognizing that innovation is here. And in 5 years' time, I hope that we can sit down at a less rancorous space and to say, we have built, we are developing, and see those Bermudians that are taking leadership roles such as you are inside of this industry.
Well, I think that's how you kick off a tech summit. Premier, thank you very much. Please join me in thanking the Premier today. Karim, thank you. Over to you.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you for your